do you extract value from the profile and reputation you've built in the marketplace? How can you package and leverage your knowledge and expertise for greater influence and impact? Welcome to Reputation Revolution, the show where we dissect what's involved in commercializing and profiting from your professional personal brand. You've put in the hard yards. Now it's time to capitalize. Let's dive in.
G'day, welcome back to the Reputation Revolution podcast, the personal brand monetization show. My name is Trevor Young. Now, as you grow your profile and reputation as a thought leader in your space, a professional domain expert of note, over time, opportunities will pop up to speak at industry events and conferences and community meetups, webinars, online summits. There's a lot of stages out there. And these are great opportunities to share your ideas and your message with a captivated audience, and in turn can help you build your professional bona fides even further and enhance your personal brand in the marketplace. But what happens if you start getting really good at this speaking caper and the stages become bigger and more prestigious? You've honed your speaking chops for free, but now you're starting to think, I could, and I probably should, get paid for all the work that I'm doing. Well, if becoming a professional keynote presenter is something that's been on your radar, stay tuned, because my guest today is a true insider of the speaking business. His name is Carson White. He's the founder of Leading Voice, a speaker management company that represents some of Australia's most respected and experienced presenters, MCs and facilitators. He's been in the speaker management trenches for some 25 years and has seen it all when it comes to presenting from the stage. Carson, welcome to the show, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for having me on. Great to connect with you again online.
And what were you doing 10 years ago? Let's kick this off.
10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, I was in the trenches in the speaking industry, as you say, mate. I was working at a large speaker bureau, and I had been there already 10 years by that point. So, I was both a franchise owner and previously I'd done a lot of their marketing. So I was their marketing manager as well.
And so tell us a bit about Leading Voice. It's a bit more of a boutique operation, and you don't call yourselves a bureau. Can you tell us the difference between what a speaker management agency does and a bureau? Because both words, phrases are used within the industry.
Yeah, well, it is more probably an industry thing. From a client point of view, all really a client cares about is actually getting a good speaker for their event or MC. So the difference really is probably more from those that play in the space of the professional speaking world. So a speaker bureau or a speaker agency, which have been around for quite a long time, for decades in fact, they basically are able to source virtually any speaker in the world that a client may want to. Or what happens more often than not is that the speaker bureau consultant will recommend speakers and or MCs to a client based on the brief, outcomes, objectives, those sort of things. So they're an agency in the sense that they're there to really to serve the client looking for someone to get up on their stage. The difference between a speaker bureau and then us as Leading Voice speaker management is that our clients effectively are the speakers and MCs that we represent, and then we help them with their marketing, their sales, handle their inquiries and do those things. So from a client's point of view, they might contact one of our speakers via their website, and then that inquiry will come to us and we'll handle that on behalf of that speaker or MC.
So it's more hands-on.
It's more hands-on, but we only also work with the people that we represent. So if someone came to us and wanted a speaker and MC that we don't actually manage, we would say, look, we can't help you with that. You need to talk to them or a speaker agency. Yeah.
Yep, got you. And I also know you represent coaches as well, but the coaches are also speakers. Is this becoming more of a trend where are coaches becoming speakers or speakers becoming coaches? And because we have now the opportunity to run a portfolio career where we can do multiple things once you're that you have that profile and reputation.
Look, the coaching thing bore out of COVID. So one of the things when obviously COVID hit, the industry got shut down and we all went online or tried to get online. So our speakers were trying to delivering online keynotes and workshops. The coaching was really from our point of view. Some of these speakers we represented already did some one-on-one coaching or some business coaching, executive coaching. For us, it was really just for us to try and move into a space that you could deliver something that COVID wasn't going to impact, i.e. deliver something online. So most coaching is delivered online. So that was really for us getting into that space. The coaches we have on our site had already been doing coaching themselves anyway, so it was just a natural progression to expand that offering.
So someone's out there and they've obviously been speaking, because you wouldn't launch into a professional speaking career without getting some runs on the board first and developing a track record. What are some of the qualities that or key characteristics that you look for in a successful professional speaker, or an agent might look for? So put your agent, speaker management hat on.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of, in terms of agent, speaker management hat, they're almost the same thing in terms of what you're looking for in a speaker. But fundamentally, over the 25 plus years I've been doing what I do, I mean, it's really interesting to kind of analyze and determine, okay, well, why does that speaker really have an impact with a particular audience, and sometimes and another speaker may not? And I've sort of drilled it down to a couple of really, really key things. The first thing is, for a speaker to get booked in the first place, they've got to have a pretty compelling story. They've got to have some really insightful content. They've got to have things that or information that will appeal to a client who will want to pay money for it. So as like anything in life, everything's very competitive. The speaking industry is hugely competitive. So if you really want to stand out, you've got to say, okay, well, what is that? What are those stories? What is that content that really separates me from every other speaker, particularly speakers in the same space that you're trying to get booked in?
Yep.
The second thing, which is probably the really most important thing, is that good keynote speakers are ultimately storytellers. You've only got anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, depending on what the client wants, to really get up there and to really kind of get some sort of an emotional shift in an audience. And what I mean by emotional shift is really get a connection with the audience so that they feel that the information that you're sharing on stage, that they're going to take something away from it. Because if you can connect with the audience, what you're then sharing is more likely to sink in, and therefore they're going to go away and actually do something as a result of hearing you speak. And really, for the vast majority of speakers out there, they really genuinely care. What they care about is actually just doing one thing after they've got off stage with the audience. So they're the two really big things: having a compelling content, having really good stories, having from that point of view, and then the flip side is being really able to share that story on stage. Two very simple philosophies, but really hard to get that mix right in order to then get paid reasonable amount of money to get up on stage and then repeat that over and over again over many, many years.
I suppose when you look at speaking too, and we're probably looking at the sort of the thought leaders who have, there to provoke thought, and to we can go into the sorts of speaking gigs that they get. But then there's the entertainers. When I say entertainers, it could be someone who's, I don't know, climbed Mount Everest, or rowed a boat across the Atlantic or something like that, who have got a great story, or they've gone through adversity and come out the other side and packaged that up as a story with lessons learned. There's that side of thing. There's probably not as many of those, and they tend to always be in demand and good for, I guess, opening and motivating audiences at conferences and events. But then you have, I guess, the more educative or thought-provoking speaker who is an expert or a thought leader in their field. Walk us through that side of things, because they'll still have stories to tell and a story and a message, but they're quite different to the, in air quotes, the entertainer sort of stroke motivator.
Yeah, well, I mean, that highlights exactly what I was just saying before in terms of the storytellers. So ultimately, you still have to be able to tell a good story. It doesn't matter whether you're a thought leader or you've done you've had an incredible experience, a life-changing experience that appeals to the audience. It really doesn't matter in terms of what the actual words coming out of your mouth are. It's how they come out of your mouth and how you engage the audience from the stage. So, but certainly, from a thought leader's point of view, I mean, I've probably watched over the years that transition from really in the early days, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of it was around the adventure stuff was huge. A lot of the speakers were around that they've had a really incredible life experience, whatever that might be, and had a few thought leaders that were really good in their space and sharing that. I've watched over the last 20 years that sort of the thought leaders probably out position those with really good stories. There are more thought leaders out there with really good content as opposed to those people that have had really interesting things happen to them, the adventurers or whatever you want to call them. So from that point of view, a thought leader, if they've got compelling content, so if they've got some really useful insights, all they then have to do is really deliver it in a way that's going to bore the crap out of the audience. So, and I still see today, probably one of my biggest frustrations as someone in an audience is when a speaker has too much content on their slides. So they let the slideshow do the talking for them to some degree. And as I always say, if you've got a slide up on the screen that's got a lot of content, they're going to be looking at the slide and not looking at you. The very best speakers virtually have very, very minimal slides. So that goes back to, if you're a content thought leader speaker, that you certainly want to make sure that most of the content and the stuff is coming out of your mouth and not being put up on as a slide. So that comes back to stagecraft and those sort of things.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to learn. What are some of is that one of the rookie errors that new speakers or let's not call them necessarily new, but emerging speakers fall for?
Yeah, look, I suppose it is, because the difficulty is if you're just starting out as speaking, where you use the PowerPoint or you use your slide presentation, your slide deck as a way to anchor and help reinforce what it is you're trying to say, but also keep you paced and where you are in the talk. So I get why people feel like they need to have those detailed PowerPoints. But if you really know your content well and you've really pulled it together well, and you don't need to have a lot of imagery up on the screen, or a lot of words, I should say. Imagery is good. So, I mean, one of the very best speakers who I'll go off on a tangent here, but I think it's really interesting, is Tom O'Toole, who you probably know of, and Tom was one of the most in-demand speakers in Australia for many, many years, and he was a baker from a little country town in Victoria called Beechworth. He failed school, he left school at 14, he had this incredible life, and then somehow out of his life turned it around and managed to build this incredible bakery. So people, as a result, he started getting asked to do talks. His talk was full of slides, but it was only photographs. He just had lots of photographs up there, and the photographs helped shape his stories and the stories he told. I mean, Tom did everything wrong in terms of what it is to be a good speaker, but managed to rate through the roof and really engage with an audience. And that comes back to his style and the fact that he was genuine on stage. He absolutely was passionate about every single word that was coming out of his mouth, and that came through on stage. But as a speaker, if you said to someone, hey, go and watch Tom O'Toole and learn from Tom, you wouldn't do that in a million years, because everything he did was wrong. But it still worked. And it goes back to those two principles I said earlier. Yeah.
Yep. Tell the story and be able to deliver it well with passion and intent and authenticity. I would imagine passion and authenticity and enthusiasm, and you're up there selling and delivering. There's quite a bit. Would you say that a lot of your speakers or the people that you've dealt with over the years, and there's many, so I don't need an exact number on this percentage, but do you reckon a lot of them are introverts?
Yeah, look, it's so just using Tom O'Toole, for example, I mean, Tom did hundreds and hundreds of talks over many, many years, and every single time he got up before he went on stage, he said his stomach was churning, he got nervous, even though he every single time he nailed it. So it's a lot of entertainers, a lot of comedians, a lot of actors are, when you put them in front of a camera, put them on stage, they're fantastic. They do what they have to do, and it's like they take on the persona on stage. But off stage, very quiet. Yeah, so it's I mean, speaking by its very nature, they're not flamboyant people generally. They're people who either had something really interesting happen to them, or they've got some really good content. But yeah, I mean, by the most part, most speakers, I would say, not say introvert, but they're not sort of brash and bold. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they're not probably naturals. I mean, you're going to have people who are naturals and they've just gravitated to the space and have nailed it just by sheer dint of their personality and wanting to do it. As we know, a lot of people hate speaking. Do you see a lot of emerging speakers and people in their early stages of their speaking career that that's just the learning, and they're worried about delivering the right thing, and they have to put on more of a show and more of a face?
Yeah, look, over the years, there's very few speakers I've seen who have literally just gone from whatever it was they're doing straight into a speaking gig and really nailed it straight up. The best I ever saw, and it's a shameless plug for one of the speakers we managed, but Adam Elliott, who won an Oscar in 2004 for a short animation film called Harvey Crumpet. Adam wins that Oscar, huge international attention, huge focus in Australia, and then went from that to within weeks on stage delivering absolutely 10 out of 10 keynote, and that was about his story, obviously, but he told that in a way, he was just charismatic, he just had that ability. But often, the vast majority of speakers, like I've worked with speakers over the years where they've come in and had a great story, but just didn't know how to shape it up or didn't know how to pull it together into something that was going to really have meaning for the audience. And so the vast majority of speakers it's a stagecraft that has worked over generally a long period of time. And that's what you find is that speakers they might know their content, they might have it well, but they just don't know how to get it across on the stage or package it up in a way that is digestible for the audience.
Yeah. And do you find, and I probably know the answer to this, but it's good to have a sort of people have a runway before they become a professional speaker. Now I can talk with that. I know I did over 50 talks before I got paid, and that was kind of life changing for me. In terms of the people who get gigs through agency. They probably go through an agency or a bureau well before they get to a management. I mean, your managers, I would guess, got the creme de la creme, but there's a lot under the surface of that. Is there a rule of thumb of how many gigs you actually have to have done or time spent in the trenches before you're going to be any good to take a fee?
No, I wouldn't say there is any hard and fast rule. Really, it comes back to how quickly, some of the things I've already mentioned, how quickly you've gone from taking your content, your story, packaging up, marketing it, because you've obviously, you've got to try and get on the stage somehow. Now, a lot of the time, it's the first 2 years, I reckon, are probably the hardest for someone wanting to be a speaker, because you're trying to really find your feet with all the things I mentioned. You're also trying to work out the sales and marketing equation. What sort of fees do you charge? So some speakers can get there really quickly, but even the top speakers now, it took them time. I mean, there's very few speakers that really come on and within 6 months are absolutely nailing it and starting to get multiple bookings and repeat booking. Particularly now, in the early days, it was probably a bit earlier. When I'm saying early days, maybe 20 years ago, because there were probably 100 speakers around in the whole of Australia 20 years ago. That were actually doing it and actually getting paid for it. Now there are thousands and thousands that, to varying degrees, that will be getting some sort of remuneration for getting up on stage and talking. But there's no set hard and fast rule in terms of time. It just matters how quickly you find your feet in some of those key areas. And a big part of it is, Trevor, is that, as you know, like you can have the best product or service in the world. If people don't know about it and don't understand what it is that you actually can do for them, then you're going to really struggle. And that's a very hard equation, particularly with speakers. Speakers, if you're a professional speaker, you're trying to market yourself. It's very hard to market yourself because it's hard to have that objective viewpoint, and that's where bringing other people in, bringing in a speaker coach or someone who's been doing it for a long time to be able to just quickly pull apart and work out, get to the core of what it is that you're about, and then how do you take that to market and sell it and promote it.
Do you recommend that people have one keynote? If you're saying, you're really wanting to nail this, you have kind of one keynote that you can really develop and improve upon and deliver again and again and again, so it's as sharp as a tack, and just that's the thing you promote? Or do you think you need to be a little bit more open-minded with numbers of different topics to get more gigs? The early days, I'm talking.
Look, I've sort of switched between, just have the one keynote, market the one key, be famous for the one keynote, to going the other way and saying, oh no, if you've got a lot of depth and a lot of breadth and a lot of content, you should actually promote all those different keynotes. And what I've kind of realised, even in the last sort of 12 months working with our speakers, is that actually what it really comes back to is the actual speaker and what it is that they actually have. So if it was Adam Elliott, for example, which I mentioned before, I mean, he really had, and the first few years of his speaking, he had this one incredible story, and he was able to adjust it slightly depending on the audience. And he didn't need to have any other keynotes because the story was amazing. If you're a content speaker or a thought leader in that respect, you then probably gonna have a few more keynotes. So, and the number of those keynotes really depend on, I guess, your overall positioning in the market, what you want to be famous for, and then from there actually working out, okay, well, under this brand of what, my personal brand in terms of, who I am and what I want to be famous for, I could have 3 keynotes in 3 different particular areas depending on, the audience, what they're looking for. The difficulty you have is the more you start to spread your brand in terms of over a number of keynotes, then people don't actually know what it is you do. And therefore, people, it's hard just to market on a keynote versus your brand. So, look, it really comes back to the individual speaker and being really clear on what they want to get. You really have to work out what you want to get famous for first in terms of that brand positioning. And your background, mate, is obviously in marketing, communications, branding, so you get that. Very, very easy to talk about, very hard to do. And again, getting someone from the outside in to actually sit down and work out what that brand is. And then from there, you can say, okay, well, given that, I could deliver 3 keynotes in the 3 core pillars of what my brand represents, and create 3 keynotes.
Yeah, no, I like that. And you become known for something, but then it's how you slice and dice them. And of course, the title of the keynote is very important because that's your sales tool as well, and a bit of a blurb, and then the outcomes too, the learning. What will people learn from that? Do you find that there are also clients? So clients could be, companies booking you for for their end of year confab with all of their staff, or it could be an association where they represent a lot of members, that sort of thing. Do you find that they often do they buy someone off the rack, or do they want to work with them to get a message across to their audience? And so someone's an expert in one area, but they have sort of a message that they want to get out to that audience, and they'll work with the speaker to work something up that's going to be relevant for that gig.
Look, generally, it's the way it works is that clients looking for a particular speaker for their audience, association audience. They've got a theme for the conference. They've got some of the challenges that the industry association might be facing and their members are facing, and they go, okay, well, as part of the conference program planning, they really nut out and articulate what those things are. Then they go away and say, okay, well, given we've got some real issues around staff retention and getting staff back into the workplace. So how do we re-engage with our staff? How do we get them out of their home environments back into the workplace? Therefore, we kind of look for. You came up with a bit of a speaker brief, and then you go look for that speaker. Then once you find the right speaker in that space, that speaker can then adapt and mould their core presentation, because ultimately a professional speaker, as you know, mate, you do not want to be creating brand new presentations from scratch every time you do it, particularly if you're doing volume presentations. But what you do have is some really good core content as a thought leader that a client that appeals to a client. The client says, okay, well, we love that, but can we just adapt it to fit in with these sort of core objectives? And a good speaker should be able to work with a client and do that. But the large majority of the content, the stories and things are going to be stuff that speaker is their intellectual property, if you like, that they're sharing. And that's why a client is booking them in the first place to come and talk at their conference, because they want that that content delivered to their members.
I guess from the speaker's perspective, you want it to land well with the audience. So how important is doing your homework on the audience that you're going to be speaking to?
Oh, look, I mean, and that goes back to right at the start when I said connecting with your audience. If you're delivering content that really doesn't sit, if it's either above the heads of the audience or just not pitched right for that audience, you're not going to connect with them at all. So really knowing where that audience has been the last 12 months in terms of their roles, their jobs, their businesses, whatever it is, whoever you're talking to. And again, this is conversation with the client pre getting up on stage and talking.
Yep.
And obviously, what are some of the things that, as they sit in that auditorium right now, what are some of the things going through their head, some of their worries, their concerns, that sort of stuff. And obviously then pitching and making sure that you understand, if you were sitting in the audience and listening to yourself speak, is what I'm saying on stage, does it resonate with me? So again, like anything in life, mate, putting yourself in the position of the customer or the client is fundamental in order to get that connection.
And it's classic content. I mean, being on, speaking is content. And so, it's no different than how you would approach a video or an article or an opinion piece or something, really. Who's the audience and how am I going to resonate? How's my message going to resonate with them? In terms of, I guess, looking more at the thought leader, the professional domain expert, etc., a lot of people now are sort of getting out and getting books, creating books. And of course, we now know that it's much easier to get a book out onto the virtual shelves than it used to be. Go back a couple of decades and you did need a publisher. What's the state of play with books? Is a book important, and do you have to have a book to be a professional speaker? And B, does it have to be through a publisher or self-published books now, given the proliferation of them is fine?
First and foremost, you don't need to have a book to be a professional speaker. So, look, if you're embarking on to be a professional speaker, you sit down and when you're doing your sales and marketing plan, you look at all aspects of, how can I generate interest in my keynote or keynotes that's going to get me money to get on stage in front of as many clients as I can possibly do. Now, if you feel compelled to write a book, you feel that you've got this bursting desire inside to get what's sitting in your grey matter out onto a bit of paper, because you feel it's going to be of some value to your potential target market or anyone out there, whatever it might be, then go and write a book. You don't, as you said, mate, you don't need to have a publisher. You can self-publish now if you're prepared to put the money up front. And often, really, that's probably a better way to go. I mean, the publishing houses, they're seen to be good because they will offer you some sales and marketing, PR, will help you get distribution, those sort of things. But as you know, mate, the book market, like everything, is really crowded and really hard to get traction. I mean, one of the speakers I represent asked me the other day, they said, she's already written a couple of books and said, I think I'm going to write a new book on this area. And I actually said, that's great, but what about if you actually stop and think, is there a way to get that content and material out, quicker, because she was talking an 18-month time frame, get that material out quicker in a way that's more digestible, that will get bigger reach, that will ultimately help drive the ultimate goal, which is what you're trying to do, which is to get on more stages. And so it's not so, whether the book is right or wrong, it's about actually going, okay, well, the book might be good, but is there a better way to do that quicker, more efficiently, that have more control over, that might actually even be able to, be a long-term project? Because the problem with writing a book, but as you know, once it's written and printed, effectively from that point on, you can't do anything with it. You can't change it. You can do a reprint if you like. You can adapt it. But for example, if instead of writing a book, you said, well, I'm going to do my own podcast around a particular area. There's a gap in the market. You feel that there's a podcast that there is a gap. You go into a podcast podcast, you can go so many ways with a podcast. Now, like everything, mate, as you know, it's hard to get a podcast up and get traction. The other side might be you create an online course or an online webinar series or something like that. So instead of doing a book, you put all that energy and effort into writing a book to create a masterclass. So you might do a masterclass for the same content you were going to put as a book. You do that as a masterclass online, 6 20-minute workshops, and you package that up, sell that, and promote that as your latest offering, as opposed to a book.
Yeah.
So there are many ways to go.
And it's all credibility too, isn't it? All of those things you've mentioned are credibility markers. And if it's one thing a client, someone doing the booking wants, they want to get rid of all the risk.
Yeah,
and that's why they use
right.
people like yourself and bureaus, like everything they do not want that speaker to flop. No one wants that speaker to flop.
No, it's probably, other than the speaker on stage if they flop, but the next person that freaks out just as much as the speaker is the actual client who's booked them, and they've got their boss in the room or their colleague in the room, and they've said, yeah, this is the speaker we have to go with, and they're and they just didn't cut it on stage. In my experience, that's very rare. Like, I've obviously there's some odd horror stories of speakers not just completely missing the mark for whatever reason. But the vast majority of speakers, the amount of talks that are delivered in this country every year, it's very rare that speakers, completely fail. They may not always hit the mark, and they might get a 6 or 7 out of 10 as opposed to a 10 out of 10. But flopping is really rare. But yes, going back to your point, the more credibility points that you can have, a little bit like when you go and get a new passport and you have to take all your different documents there to verify who you are, which is all about verifying your credibility. If you can think of it like that, so that if you had all these different elements out there that people can go and research you and get different perspectives on you before they book you, it's all going to help.
And so when you're talking, you did mention about how many people are out there speaking and frequency. Let's look at frequency for I guess an up and comer. Now, again, you've got people who are pros and they're doing this all the time. And for a lot of them, it's their livelihood. But for most speakers, it's not their livelihood. It is an adjunct to maybe coaching and consulting and running a business and selling some courses and doing workshops, which kind of falls under speaking, I suppose you could say. What would be an average that I'm just talking more about expectations now. If you've been out and about and you're getting paid professionally and you've been doing it for a couple of years now, or you're quite new to the game, what would be an expectation? You'd be doubtful to be doing it a couple of times a week.
Yeah, look, it's like the very, very best speakers, you're probably talking 1 or 2% of the whole speakers world in Australia. They might be doing somewhere in the vicinity of 80 to some, doing 100, 120 keynotes a year. That was certainly pre-COVID. I'm not across how many talks the top speakers would be doing post-COVID. I would think that, that 1 or 2% would be doing somewhere between 60 and 80 minimum, probably more, maybe closer to 100. But they're like the all-stars. So the vast majority of speakers, if you can get somewhere between 30 and 50 gigs a year paid, I'm talking just the 45-minute keynote, get on stage, deliver your keynote, as opposed to workshop or coaching or those other things, then you would have a good speaking business. But what I also say too, really, just being a keynote speaker these days really isn't. It's one core element. But if you're a good keynote speaker and you've got content, you should be looking at doing all those other things you mentioned anyway. Like, they all should be part of your offerings to clients. And one of the big things now really is, if you're doing a keynote talk for a client and that client really, you resonate with the client and the audience and you've really add value into that organisation, is saying, okay, well, how do I have a conversation with that client to say, okay, well, what else can we do moving on? And really that conversation should be framed up before you actually even have jumped on stage, and get a sense of what the organisation's needs, challenges are, and then, okay, well, as in terms of what it is that you offer, can you align any of the stuff that you offer with some of those things post-conference? And that's where the opportunities for speaking is that you could do, 3, 6, 12 month contracts post-speaking. Yeah.
and that's when you're starting to really build a business around your knowledge, your expertise, and your ability to get up there and present. I'm working with one expert, thought leader at the moment, and have been for this year, and he's he'll go and do a lot of keynotes, very much in corporate, and he'll do a keynote, to the bigger crew of the company, and then he'll work with middle management and senior management, coaching, and then training. So he's got coaching, training at a middle management level, coaching at a higher level, and then he's got speaking and presentations for everyone else. So, one client can be worth a lot more to him than if you just had a keynotes presentation and that's all you did. In terms of fees, now these are Australian. We've got audiences listeners around the world, very much in the US and the UK as well. But this is all relative, I would imagine, because it's in terms of dollars, it's going to be different per country, but I guess the same rules apply, supply and demand, and how good you are. But what could a very new speaker who's done the hard yards, ready, they've got an audience, they've got a brand, they may even have a book, but they're now just starting to speak. Probably not on the massive stages, of course, but there are lots of different stages, and it doesn't always have to be big auditoriums or anything like that. What's sort of the finances these days, the fees that they could expect?
So the vast majority of good speakers in Australia, and this is just to give a benchmark in terms of for that particular speaker you're using, the vast majority of good speakers in Australia probably fall between that $6,000 to $10,000 mark. That's Australian dollars for a 45 to 60 minute keynote. If you are, the person you described, look. For me, I would personally, and this is only a personal opinion. Other agents might have different opinion, but you're better off starting lower with your fee and getting some traction with your keynotes than trying to go in too high and go. Well, you might think and you may very well be a $7,000 keynote in terms of your capability, your skill set, your content, your storytelling, all of that stuff. But because you're new to the market, I would be suggesting you start at that, $3,000 or $4,000 mark, and get on stages and get traction and get exposure from that point of view. You're still obviously getting paid, because very quickly, if you are that speaker that you think you are, you will start to generate demand, and you'll start to get people going, okay, have you heard about this speaker? They're really good, and you'll be able to put your fee up. You're better off starting at a lower point and putting your fee up than starting at a higher point and not getting much work. And like anything in life, mate, the more you do speaking, and the better you're going to get. So the more opportunities to get on stage is A, that's a massive tick. B, if you can get paid an okay fee to do it while you're doing it, well then to me that's a win-win, and you build from there.
Is there a sort of a word of mouth in the speaker industry? So if someone is good and they're really starting to nail it at the bottom end, is there does word get out? Is it such a closed job?
Yeah, it does. Look, when I was in bureau agency world, so when I was at the large speaker bureau, you always got your ear to the ground in terms of the next person coming along. I mean, there was a guy called John Anderson. This was years ago, and he was the founder of Kentucky Tours. Now, Kentucky is a very well-known brand globally, obviously huge travel company. But, like anything, you don't really think about, well, what are the origins of Kentucky? Where did that story come from? Well, John got asked to talk at a conference in New Zealand. I think he was 71. So he'd pretty much gone his whole life. He'd done the whole Kentucky thing and never really spoken about it ever, and got asked to speak at a livestock conference. And then as a result of speaking at livestock conference, everyone in New Zealand just goes, God, here's a New Zealand company, because it was a New Zealand organisation, that we knew nothing about. And what an incredible story. Like, John's story was absolutely incredible. So it didn't take long for him to go from, just doing a one talk at a livestock conference to all of a sudden this guy's got an incredible story. It's an amazing story, but he also tells it really well. And within 12 months, he just went from zero to hero within 12 months. But that is probably certainly rarer. And I because I'm not so much in that loop anymore, as a management company, I focus on the speakers that are managed. We get often, I probably speak to 2 speakers a month that get referred to me who want to. In fact, straight after I get off this call, I'm talking to someone who's interested in wanting to potentially join Leading Voice. The vast majority of those conversations don't result in us taking on them from a management point of view because they're either we're not the right fit for them or they're not the right fit for us. So we can only take on a small group of speakers because it's only myself and my business partner Simone. We can only spread ourselves across a certain number of speakers. But yeah, in terms of out there, the industry will generally, there'll be a speaker that will come along every now and again that everyone goes, wow, this speaker is going to really blow. You'll have a massive impact in the industry. Yeah, but I'd say it's rare, but and I think it's also rare too because there are so many people out there speaking now, and like anything, there's a lot of noise and clutter in the marketplace. So for clients out there, it's very hard to determine, there's all these speakers that might talk on leadership, for example. How do you know which one really is going to be the leadership speaker that's going to connect and resonate with your audience? And so it's very difficult to kind of really from a client point of view, get an understanding of who that really good speaker is, unless, as I said, there's someone like a John Anderson comes along and it's an absolute no-brainer. I mean, he could talk at virtually any conference.
Yeah. And so I guess you've mentioned COVID a couple of times, and that changed the ball game for the speaking world and obviously the advances in technology and that side of things. How do you advise your speakers to stay relevant and to adapt towards evolving trends and audience expectations, and how much online are they actually doing these days?
So it's not like people occasionally get one of the speakers will say, what's really popular out there, what is an audience, what is a trend, and I'm very much more of the way of thinking that you don't necessarily adapt yourself to a trend. Is you've certainly got to stay or remain true to yourself, but how you remain relevant, hopefully in terms of particularly if you're a thought leader, that the space that you're in, you're continually learning, evolving, and adapting yourself. So that I'm going to give you an example. Nigel Collin, who we represent. Nigel wrote a book quite a few years ago called Game of Inches, and he interviewed 100 CEOs around Australia and basically was able to determine what was the common things that made them all successful CEOs and then successful companies, and really what distilled out of that was all of them had the mindset of slow incremental growth over a long period of time following a process. And so Nigel wrote this book, Game of Inches. But Nigel has continued to evolve himself. He went out and got a master's in growth innovation, and then he's doing a PhD now in this whole grassroots innovation space. So even though he's an established speaker that has got credibility in the space, he's continually to go out there and learn and adapt and evolve. So for him, in terms of staying relevant, he can then create content for LinkedIn and his social media, his articles, those sort of things that is relevant and certainly remains current. Therefore, as a speaker, remains valuable to an audience.
Yeah, and particularly if you're in an industry that is changing, what was your keynote 2 years ago might not cut it today. And I guess the great thing about getting out there and creating content, and whether it's a podcast or you're on LinkedIn or whatever, you're also seeing the topics and the issues and the pain points and seeing what lands with people and what's resonating. And there's some good indicators in that regard. And just circling back to I actually put a couple of questions there together because I'm very interested to see how you got your evolution of your keynotes and your content, but the delivery of that now and doing the virtual events, is that sort of petered out now, or do you think virtual events are here to stay now?
I think virtual is definitely here to stay. Probably more in what they call a hybrid format, which for those that are in the events industry know that it's the live experience combined with an audience sitting at home watching it, or sitting in the office watching it online. So the hybrid model is here to stay. Not every conference is going to have a hybrid version, A, for the cost, and B, it's just not relevant. But given the fact that a lot more companies have got staff working from home and then also staff at an office, so a hybrid model works. The whole delivery solely online, so and doing that, we've seen that drop right away. So that's something that the end of the day, the live experience is ultimately still going to be the best experience. I use the analogy with someone: would you go and rather see your favourite rock band live in a stadium or at a venue, or watch them online? And the answer is obviously you'd rather go and see them live. And speaking is a bit like that. When you're in a room with a really good speaker and with colleagues or people, you're going to get a better experience. You're going to feel the resonance of the room. So therefore, it's going to be an all-round better experience for you than sitting and isolated in a home or a home office or and watching it online. So yes, the hybrid thing will stay. I mean, the ability to deliver online keynotes, it's fantastic. I mean, one of the massive positives of COVID is that we all got to this technology to be able to do this. So that's been hugely positive. But I still think at the end of the day, people want to see and experience speakers live.
Yeah. And just to finish up, and thanks for your time, Carson. This is very illuminating, and it's a bit of a, I guess, I wouldn't call it a dark art, but it's, there's people have seen speakers, they've probably aspired to be a speaker, and they're wondering what goes on behind the scenes. So thank you for taking us behind the velvet rope of the speaking industry. Just going back to our aspiring speaker, and they've done community meetups, and they've probably been invited to industry conferences and seminars, and a lot of those they're all done for free, and as you should do them for free to hone your craft until you're at a point where people will pay you. What are 2 or 3 tips that you think that apart from the content's got to be you got to package that up, but is getting a speaker's coach a really important thing for people to do? What are a couple of go-to tips that they should start thinking about now in order to make that leap to becoming pro?
So I would add in the 2 things I mentioned earlier around obviously the content and having really content that's marketable and appeal, the ability to do it on stage. The third aspect of that is if you want to be a professional speaker, you need to sit down. You're starting a new business, or you're starting, like any business, you want to sit down and do your planning stuff. So before you go and find out who you might need on your team and who else I need can speak to and what advice I can get, sit down and go as far as you can yourself. So first things first is, just sit down with a bit of paper in front of the computer. What do I think my brand is? What do I think the offering is? Who do you think it's going to appeal to? How many talks do you want to do a year? What sort of fees do you want to charge? What's the audience outcomes? What's my profile going to look like? Do I need a website? If I need a website, what does that look like? So do as many things as you can yourself. Get it to a point that you go, I cannot get this any further. I don't know how to market it any further. I don't know how to get out there and sell what I do. At that point, you go, okay, well, look, then you start to look around and go, well, I would certainly, it is worth talking to someone who's been doing it for a long time. So someone that puts themselves out there as a speaker coach. But it's not just about that, because a speaker coach is not just about obviously coaching them on stage, but it's how do you build a speaking business, and so how do you actually do all the things in the background in order to do it. So yes, I would recommend once you've done stage 1, which is do as much as you can and get as far as you can, because you might surprise yourself and actually go, well, geez, actually I'll put the work in. I may not need a speaker coach, or I may not need someone to help me to show me how to build a speaker business. I'll be able to do it organically myself. But 9 times out of 10, I would recommend going and get a speaker coach. I mean, elite athletes don't go out there and train by themselves and run around a track by themselves or swimming pool or whatever. They get coaches in to help them, and it's no different in this particular business. That would be the priority thing. And then the other side of that coin is go and see as many speakers as you can. So if you get the opportunity to go and see speakers and go and watch speakers and go, well, I really liked what that speaker did there, or how they did that, or how they moved. Now, one of the things I always say is don't ever try and be something you're not. So if I use the Tom O'Toole example, he never tried to be anything that he wasn't. And that, as you said, authenticity that you mentioned earlier, it came through. So you can still go and see and learn from really good speakers and take some of the things that they do and put that back into your stagecraft, but also have a look at how they market themselves, have a look at their websites, have a look at their LinkedIn content, those things, and take elements that you think that that you feel comfortable with actually doing, and weave that into your business. Because I'm a big believer that you do not need to reinvent the wheel with this stuff. There are people out there who have done the hard yards, and so hence getting a coach is good, but also continuing your ongoing research in terms of and just keeping an eye open for what might work. I mean, what's interesting, mate, I've been doing it for a long time. I still don't know, I still reckon I only know 10% of it, and I'm continually, all year, I'm always continually going, okay, well, that didn't work, and as you know in life, mate, most things that you learn from are the things that didn't work or haven't worked. I don't profess to know a lot of this stuff. I mean, I've been doing it 25 years. I've learned a few things over my time, but I'm always looking and seeing what other people are doing and what's working, what's not working. And COVID has been a real kind of not a kick in the ass, but it's sort of reshaped the way I think about the speaking business and how to manage speakers and how to promote speakers. That's for sure.
Yeah, so what I hear you say is, stagecraft is, and that's probably where people stop. It's about, can I get up on stage and do it, and whether there's a fear of doing it or whatever. But they want to be able to deliver, a great presentation, and it's all about the stagecraft, and that's what they throw. And when you're doing it for nothing, that's really all it's about. It is about getting up and delivering the right content, and delivering it on stage well. But as you said right from the outset, and this is where a speaker's coach, a good one, can help you, is it's also about how you package that speech and that presentation, and what your slides look like, where you walk on the stage, rhythm, and speed up, slow down, all of those technical things which I'd put under stagecraft. But then there's the actual presentation itself and the content. But as you rightly alluded to, your brand and your online and offline presence, and all the content that you do, and the social media and everything else, your earned media, that all comes into play as well. So there's quite a bit to think about. And as you've mentioned the word a bit, it's business. It is actually a business if you want to take it seriously, even if it's going to be part-time. And as you said, most of people are part-time. They are running businesses and they're doing other things as well, and have got other products and services. But it still needs to be treated as a business. And and if you want to be an aspiring speaker, create a speaker's kit on your website and tell everyone you're a speaker, because people won't know unless you put it on LinkedIn and on your website and stuff. So that's always been my tip for people who are really early days. Be a speaker. Put it out there. I'm a speaker and these are my topics, and start from scratch and do any gig you can. It's no different than a band. I was watching a YouTube clip last night, Talking Heads, on one of the talk shows, and early days, 40 years ago, they had the, one of the great rock concert docos, and 40 years, and they still talk about the early days of where they were, playing at pizza parlors and stuff like this. You got to do those hard yards. There's no way around it. So, whatever the speaker's equivalent is of diners and pizza parlors, you got to be able to do that. And they're probably called community meetups.
Yeah, absolutely. When someone says to me, you go and talk to your local Rotary clubs, they're always looking for good speakers, or looking for speakers, and you're not going to get a fee, but there are hundreds of Rotary clubs around Australia that will have you come and talk. So your local Rotary groups are really good. It is interesting. But what I was just really going to say, probably just to round out the conversation, mate, is that there's a really good speaker I know, Peter Turin. He talks about who do you need to have on your team in order to be successful. And so if you worked out, look, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and therefore I need to get a coach on X and a coach for Y and another coach for Z. Look at what you do in the world that you do in terms of your that creating the PR warrior and the content creation and this podcast alone. If you're looking to be a speaker, this podcast is absolutely gold in terms of being able to generate and create ideas for yourself, so that you can actually go out there and deliver that content online and promote yourself through your social media channels. But so a coach doesn't need to be actually someone you go and pay necessarily, although highly recommend get Trevor if you wanted to look for a really good coach in this space, because I've known Trevor for a long time. But it's really there are so many ways to go and get and learn about how to become a better marketer of your speaker business out there. So don't try not to tunnel vision yourself down one particular path.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Carson. This has been fantastic. And where can people check you out? Leadingvoice.com.au is the best place, and on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Leadingvoice.com.au and at Carson White across the socials.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of the year in speaking.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure. Really a pleasure to have join you today on the podcast.